to the podcast version of 32 Bar Cut, the show, a series for performers, about performers, made by performers. Every week, we give audition advice, share personal experiences, and sit down with fellow colleagues in the performing arts to chat about their life in the industry. If you are hearing this message, you are not currently a subscriber and will only be hearing the first half of the podcast. If you would like to hear the full interview, including the curtain call series, you'll want to head over to 32barcut.com, where you can find a link to our Patreon page. There you will have exclusive access to the entire video and private RSS podcast feed, as well as other subscriber-only content. Thanks for listening. Without further ado, on to the show.
He's lovable, he's loyal, and he's generous in real life and on stage. Welcome to the show, Ben Jeffrey.
Hi, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
We are so excited to have you on.
I'm stoked to be here. This is going to be super fun.
Oh, yeah. Because now I get to hear about your whole life, and I feel like there's so many parts I don't know, which is pretty exciting. Yeah.
It's riveting stuff. So just be prepared.
So how are you doing? I always like to start the show with asking everybody how they're doing. How are you?
We're all sort of muddling through, right? And so I am, well, I will say this, I'm better now than I was 6 months ago.
Hey.
Because I didn't, the weird thing is everyone knows we're all shut down overnight, right? For all of us. And I think so for me and for a lot of us and everyone has their own unique struggle and pain that comes from that. And for us, it was the fact that we went from doing 8 shows a week, in my case for 10 years, to doing nothing in a day. And I would love to say that I was a grown up and resilient and coped with that like a champion. And that's a lie. So I definitely was I'm going to just basically not deal well with my identity being flushed down the toilet. And, but we all got through that because it's also, I think the hardest thing about this has been that it feels like the goalpost keeps getting moved, right? Mm-hmm. We keep just getting, first it was 2 weeks, no problem. 2 weeks. I was awesome. 2 weeks off my knee, easy peasy. Then it was a month and I'm still what manageable. Then we were talking about the fall. Then we were talking about the new year. Now we're talking about this fall, and who knows? So I kind of got to the point now where I'm just pretty much until I hear "Circle of Life" on stage, I won't believe it's actually happening. But now it's also we've all sort of adjusted and found ways that we fit in. And my family's very fortunate. My wife's a mental health counselor, so her practice blew up. Turns out. It's a lot of stress in the world right now. So we've been very fortunate that we've still been able to make ends meet. And, I've been able to find a part-time job as well, working with kids at a remote learning center just to kind of help young people who are trying to get educated during this time, which is its own challenge. So falling into a new rhythm is happening, and it's hard because we're all still sort of in a holding pattern, I think. But by and large, now I'm in a holding pattern that's a little more manageable than just being sad and depressed all the time. So we're getting by.
Yeah, I love that your answer was so real. Honestly, I wouldn't expect anything less from you because you really don't, you don't put on facades. But my
life is a lie.
I can relate to that so hardcore because just losing your identity in a day. Honestly, I was feeling the same way about the knees. I was when we get back from this, man, my knees, the swelling is going to be down.
So good.
Lubricated. It's going to be great. And then I was what am I doing? And, we were in Holt Summit, Missouri, which is, it was safer because there's so few people there. But also, I just went from the hustle and bustle of maneuvering through people and the train and, mayhem to just quiet and I don't know. It was very difficult. Austin's laughing at my sounds. Anyway.
He's over there, and he's like, I mean, like, I was there. It wasn't the end of the world.
Right. He's like, what about me?
Yeah. No, and I can empathize with it. And we stayed here, which was its own weirdness because the city shut down. So I mean, I think everyone at that time we're all going to be talking about this in therapy for the next 15 years, and that's just part of what it is. But also, like, the thing I try to remember is I'm like, it's my first global pandemic. I don't know about you, but this is my first one. So I think that, like, we can like take a little pressure off of ourselves to have done this well, because nobody had a metric for it, like literally nobody. So take a step back. The fact that, like, we're still standing and I'm not like a complete alcoholic whose like family left him, you know what I mean? I'm just going to take that win. You know what I mean? Win. Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at now too. every day I'm not in a ditch somewhere is a win.
And I feel like too, that whole family aspect, now you get to spend more time. I know you always you're a family guy. You've been spending time, but it's like, oh, now you really get to sit in and experience that without breaks and without the rigor of going into work.
Yeah. And that's a great thing. And it's a great thing. The weird thing is, like, the other thing for me is, right, I just come off a medical leave. So I'd had 2 surgeries starting in December 2019. And I'd just come back. I'd been back at the show for a week and a half when the shutdown happened. And my wife was like, finally, he's going to be gone and I'm going to have the house to myself for the first time in like 2 months. And then I was like, hey, surprise!
I'm back.
And she was like, ah, damn it. So, so that was like hard too, because there was a lot of togetherness, you know what I mean? But like, some of the advantages have been, like, it's been great because, like, my daughter is 6 and this is the first time I've ever been able to put her to bed more than 2 days in a row. You know what I mean? So getting to, like, have that time and form that attachment has been really special. I built her a new bed that's pretty badass. It's got a slide on it because they closed all the playgrounds here for like 3 months. So I was like, well, I need to feel useful. So I'm going to heal my childhood wounds through you. So, but so it's been special in that way. And it's been tough in that way because part of it too is, like, your routine and your schedule gets so disrupted. And we had a rhythm, like, our family, it wasn't a perfect rhythm. No one's is, but we had a rhythm and it was working. And then it really got disrupted. And so everyone had, I think, a difficult time adjusting to that, us, our daughter, but now we're in a new rhythm. And I think that that's going to teach us some resiliency for the next time things get disrupted, because they will, hopefully not by a global pandemic, but they will.
Yeah, absolutely. Because with our job, with us being on principal contracts, you have that pressure to fulfill all the obligations, and to be charming and to be, the epitome of what they're looking for, at least close to it, so that you get that contract every year. And I think now being stripped of all that kind of puts the pressure off of that feeling. It's like, oh, well, I know what this feels like. I'll be all right if I don't get that contract next year. But what's really cool about you, what I learned about you in our time at The Lion King, is that you kind of hit the jackpot as an actor. And I would love for you to share that experience with us. Because, like, did you always want to be an actor?
No, I started, the story of Ben in a nutshell, right? So growing up in Kansas City, and Austin could probably attest to this, the South Kansas City, like, so I would have been in, like, the Center or Grandview school districts, which are some of the worst school districts in the country, like, have been unaccredited for like 20 years. And I mean, they're terrible. And so my parents were like, well, we want him to be able to read. We don't want him to get shot. We can't afford private schools. So they homeschooled us. So we were all, me and my 2 brothers were home educated, K through 12. And my mom wanted us to have the arts in our life and social interaction and stuff like that. So she founded a performing arts group for homeschool students in the greater Kansas City area. And when she started it, I was like 6 years old and there were like 8 kids involved. And then when I graduated high school, there were over 200 families involved. And we had like music and dance and, choir classes. And we were doing a couple of different productions a year and stuff like that. So it kind of turned into a really cool thing. And that's where I caught the bug. And when I was 16 or 17, it went from being fun to something that I was like, I think I want to give this a shot. Like I'm pretty good at it. At least that's what like all my friends and family who come see my shows are telling me. So let's find out if they're right. And I went to college, went to grad school. And I remember in college, my junior year of college, talking to my theater department chair. And this is something I recommend for all young people. I just do like have a stuff. I went to him and I was like, okay, listen, you can't hurt my feelings here. I just want you to tell me the truth. Do you think I have a shot at doing this or not? Or like, and I was like, I'm going to finish out my time here. So you're not going to like lose a student or anything like that. But like, if this is not a feasible thing for me, let me know now so I can like plan my life after this. You know what I mean? And if you think it is a possibility, like if you think I've got what it might take, what's the next step? So and I was lucky to go to a pretty, there's only about 60 people in my department. So we were able to have those interactions with our teachers. And he's one of my great mentors, Adam Hester. And he was like, yeah, I think you should. And I think these are the next steps. So I think you should go to grad school. I think, it's because I'm young for my type. I have kind of a lot of like paternal older brother energy, but I got like a big baby face under this beard. So one of the nice things about the pandemic is being able to grow a beard and not look like I'm 12 for a change. So he was like, I think you'll age in your type a little bit better. So like, if you were going to go to grad school, like now's the time. So I did. And then getting to Lion King was the thing. So I went to Rutgers for 3 years and we had a showcase at Rutgers. And it's a very good show. And a showcase, for those of you that don't know, is basically you host a performance and everyone in your class does like usually a couple like short 3-minute scenes, and they invite an audience of casting directors and agents. And Rutgers at the time was a top 5 school for acting. So it was a very good showcase turnout. Like we get a lot of casting directors and agents that show up. And I was fortunate enough to get some interest from that and signed with an agency I really loved and got very good vibes from. And then, that was like the first recession. That was like the 2008, 2009 recession. So like the economy was still recovering. So like nobody was doing anything new. So I had a couple of indie films lined up in Kansas City. And so my agents were like, oh my God, go. Like we have nothing for you here. If you have work, just go do it. So I did. And then I moved to New York in November of 2009. And I auditioned for Lion King in February of 2010 and found out I was going to be Pumbaa about a month after that. So it was, I caveat this story for young people with, that's usually not how it goes.
No.
Like I'm very fortunate and I'm very blessed and I'm extremely grateful. But it was definitely like, yeah. So I kind of, in about 5 months, I went from working at Starbucks to being a principal on Broadway, which was pretty crazy.
That's the story I wanted everybody to hear, because oftentimes you hear about the hitting of the pavement, and that's what I remember talking to you about this like a couple years ago, that's what you expected. You had kind of banked on, waiting a couple of years and doing the survival jobs and until it came your way.
Mm-hmm. Well, I said, I'm going to give this 3 years. I'm going to give it as long as I gave grad school. So I'm going to go to New York and I'll stay for 3 years, like no matter how miserable it is. And if nothing's happened, it's time to call it, right? Like it's time for me. Now that's my metric. That's my timeline. It can be different for everyone, because I know people have been here for like 15, 20 years and then something breaks. Like that's probably a more common story, because it's a pretty fickle industry. And listen, I worked very hard in college and grad school, and I worked very hard on my audition. I still work very hard. And all of that hard work is probably maximum 10% of what got me the job on Broadway. Like, you know what I mean? Like I was replacing the original Pumbaa, Tom Allen Robbins. I was young. I was unheard of. I was cheap. I was all these different things. So it was so much of it was being in the right place at the right time. And just kind of controlling the little element of it that I could. But yeah, I was expecting to be, working at Starbucks or something like that for at least a couple of years. And I signed into that. I was a barista at Starbucks, and I remember calling my dad about 3 months in and being like, I mean, I am, and that was rough. That was rough for a while, but
I missed you there. Yeah. What did you said you called your dad? I'm so sorry.
My wife knows I have this interview and she's calling me anyway. I thought I'd put this thing on I did put it on Do Not Disturb. I don't know why. I don't know why she's doing this. So, sorry about that. But, it's because she can call me through my Do Not Disturb because she's special. So No, I was working at Starbucks, and I remember calling my dad and being like, I mean, I have a master's degree in acting. I've been in school for 7 years, and I'm making people their lattes, and that's like really depressing.
Yeah.
You know.
Ben,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, right there with you. I waited tables. I was a hostess. You know, I remember this woman one time. I was working at this super posh restaurant in downtown Chicago. And this woman, I was the only hostess left. And so coat check was closed, meaning if you needed your coat, you needed to go downstairs and get it with the coat check person. We were no longer getting the coats for people because there was only one person at the front door and we had to man the front door. And I explained this to her, and she just made me feel like, you know, sludge on the ground, basically. How dare I not go get her coat? And I just thought, this is how we treat service people here in this country. You know, I mean, not that everyone does this, but there's this hierarchy. If you have money, you can talk to people however you want. And I was like, no, ma'am. I'm not getting your coat. And it became a whole thing. Like the management came and they were like, why didn't you just get her coat? And I was like, you know what? At this point, it's principle. I'm not getting her coat. Yeah. You can take that elevator right next to me and go get your coat. But my point is,
there was an elevator. What's she crying about?
She just, you know, she
sucked.
She never heard no before in her life. She had enough money to where she doesn't hear the word no. I'm a Black girl telling her, no, I'm not going to get your coat. And it was just the whole thing. But yeah, master's degree, fetching people's coats, delivering groceries, making lattes. It can it can wear you out. But if you stick with it, it's worth it because it means that you're available to go on these auditions. If you had been working a job probably that you were more qualified for, I mean, well, you were overqualified to make lattes, but then you might not have had the wiggle room to go on auditions.
That's true. And also, I actually think that the more important lesson I think I learned all of that is and this is a lesson that I continue to relearn and had to relearn during this pandemic is what is your identity actually based in? Because if it is based in where and how you are working, you will perpetually be miserable because there's always somewhere better to be. You know, there's always something else that you're going to want. And so and that was really what my dad told me when I called him and told him about this. He was like, listen, this is not who you are. You know what I mean? And you need to figure that out for yourself because otherwise you will never be happy. Because if you keep basing your worth in that, look, we're Broadway, we're great. I'm getting to do the thing I wanted to do since I was 16 years old. I've gotten to do it for 10 years. That's fantastic. And then it was taken away overnight. Mm-hmm. So what is that? If my whole being is wrapped up in that, I'm toast because it's fickle.
Yeah.
Like it's going to be gone for one reason or another, you know? And so that's a lesson learned too, which is that this does not have to define you as a human being, you know? And these jobs, so I always tell people now, I'm like, listen, I did all the things wrong. I came to New York with like no money, no job. I just gotten married. My wife was like, F this noise. This guy sucks. And all these things were happening. And now I'm like, listen, go save up your pennies. You go, you have a bunch of money in the bank. You line up a survival job before you even move in, get an apartment with roommates that you can afford and blah, 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 all these smart decisions that I didn't do. So,
well, I was thinking back to when you were mentioning your showcase and that you booked an agent that way and you said, I got a good vibe. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think it's really important that you and your agents like each other.
So I think, the trick is this, is that this is like good fortune coming my way, right? I can't take it. I had a bunch of different agencies that were interested in working with me. Mm-hmm. And this is going to sound really boastful, and I'm not trying to be that way. But people are genuinely lucky to get one or two. Mm-hmm. That's a good response. You know what I mean? If you got one or two agencies that want to work with you, that's a big victory. You know what I mean? Because there's only so many slots for people to represent. Mm-hmm. So I had a bunch, and I had a bunch of different meetings with people. And so I was sort of had the luxury and the privilege of being able to say, there's these 3 or 4, I had several that I was like, you guys you're not on the level of these other ones. Okay. Mm-hmm. Right. So thank you very much. I wish you all well. That's not where we're going to go. And then there were 3 or 4 that I was like, these are really good agencies that I would be fortunate to work with any of them. And I sort of had the luxury of being able to say, but this agency are humans that I like, and I get a sense of them as people. Like other agencies are like, listen, we want you to work harder for your career than we are. If every other actor does 100 push-ups, you do 110, and we, blah blah blah. And I'm like, I don't think I've got that in me. Like, I'm not wired for that. Like the hustle like that, I do not do that well. And so I'm like, okay, I mean, maybe that's what it takes. And then this agency, I was like, so like, what do you guys expect from me? That was one of my interview questions. And they were like, we really want you to be available because we want to get you work.
Mm-hmm.
So we just want, and I was like, you mean you'll do that? And they were like, yeah, like that's our job. And I was like, yes, that's what. But I also was fortunate to know, like, I had one of my teachers' husbands was actually repped by that same agency. So I had sort of an inside idea about who they were. And they had a child who had contracted cancer, childhood leukemia. Mm-hmm. And the agency said, okay, we're not going to send you on any out of town stuff. We're going to get you booked for stuff that shoots here, that shows here. That don't worry about it. We know what your family's going through, and we're going to be here for you. We're going to get you work. And so I'm like, I'm interested in that. I'm interested in people that show up and are human beings to other people that aren't just like, oh, I'm really sorry about your kid, but this is a great job in, Poughkeepsie or whatever. Like so that was honestly the biggest factor for me. And frankly, I would rather work with, and my agency was not a lower tier agency. They were a really great agency, but I'd rather work with a lower tier agency of people that I want to work with than a big name and a big reach that I don't want to talk to and don't want to be around, So that was, so yeah, if you can get that, that's great. That's what I do think any agent is better than no agent most of the time, because even a lazy agent, at least you can be like, hey, this is coming out, submit me. You know what I mean? Like they can make a call for you and negotiate for you, so you don't have to be the bad guy. And there's a lot of different ways that works, which I think is healthy. But also then I think if you've got an agent, you don't think of that as a stepping stone until you can find someone else. You know what I mean? But I was lucky enough to be with them for 10 years. And then they closed because of the pandemic, which was so sad. But fortunately, one of them moved to a different agency and was able to bring me along. So I'm still working with part of them, which was very comforting to me, because I mean, they were at this point, they were my friends. I mean, they've been working with me for 10 years. And so I was heartbroken to lose that. And I'm glad some of it gets to go on.
That's really good advice, Ben. I think that our listeners and viewers are really going to appreciate that, because the story is different for everyone, but there's some fundamental things you should look for, because it's really going to help fashion your career, and you want someone that's rooting for you and believes in you. But that's a human being, because we were chatting before via email before our meeting today, and you were just talking about how you really want to push for people to show more empathy and kindness in their interactions with each other in this industry. Because oftentimes you can just feel like, another number or just a faceless person until something sparks and they're interested in you. But otherwise you can feel subhuman in ways.
Absolutely. I think that it's hard, right? Like we have an overbalanced industry. There's so many people that want to be like, before the pandemic, the Actors Equity Union had a 90% unemployment rate. You know what I mean? Like, so that's the situation. There are a lot of people who want to be actors and not a lot of jobs for actors, and I don't want to discourage anybody from doing what they love. It's obviously, I've had a wonderful life that I'm very grateful for. I also do always say this to young people: if there's another thing you can do and be happy, that's probably going to be easier than doing it. And I would recommend you do that thing. But if there's not, and I had the blessing and the curse kind of only being good at one thing. Like I was not a great barista at Starbucks. You know what I mean? I was okay, but I was not great, because I'm pretty good at this and I'm not good at a lot of other things, So I was like, I really hope this works out. But yeah, I think that there can be an idea of being cutthroat and backstabbing and, going around people and manipulation. And I get it, because there's a certain element of ego that's unavoidable in the arts, right? Like basically what you and I are telling people is we think it's worth it for them to pay hundreds of dollars for tickets to come watch us pretend, right? You know what I mean? And there's more to it than that. That's a gross mischaracterization and an understatement of the work that we do. But at its heart, we're telling stories, and we're saying, pay lots of money to come watch us tell stories. There's a certain element of hubris in that. You know what I mean? Like there's an element of ego that's involved there, I think. And I don't think that that means it's not valuable and not important. I think that just means that's part of that circumstance. And so when you get that many big egos lining up, there's probably always going to be some friction. But what I think that my experience has always been that when people try to work together to tell the story and try to remember that at the end of the day, we're telling a story, nobody's dying here. Nobody's right. You know what I mean? And we're telling a story. We're doing something that we love. We're doing something that is valuable to the world. And also that I think art is at its most beautiful when it's a service. You know what I mean? I think that when we put art on a pedestal, it just becomes very, very self-serving and uninteresting to me. I think it's much better when it's something that we are giving people, and that's its value. It teaches and it defines and it crystallizes the things that we believe. And I think that's wonderful. And when we recognize that to do that, what you really have to do is crawl inside other people's skin. That should be the key to empathy. Like, I think actors should be the first people who are saying, what's it like to live your story? What's that actually like for you? And that should teach us something about how we treat other people and how we treat ourselves, and I think that because it's not actually easy to act well, like people think it is, and because look, there's the perfect role for everyone, right? Like, you got a biology student somewhere, there is some role and some take on some camera where he will be brilliant and worthy of an Oscar. So that's not acting, though. That's existing and getting filmed doing it, which I don't think is art. Yeah. So but I do think that being able to tell stories and put on someone's story and tell that in a truthful way is deeply valuable. And I think that is what I think is so important about art is that it engenders empathy and sympathy and curiosity about other people and about their stories. And it finds it, like, as different as all of our stories are, they're also so much the same. Like Lion King is a great example, right? It's about lions. So I don't have a deep personal connection to it. You know what I mean? It's also in South Africa, which I've never been to. I've been in the show for 10 years. I still only know what about 30% of the South African words mean in the show, but there's also something about that story that's my story, and those are the things that I think get me really jazzed about being an artist and being an actor. And I don't understand why in an industry that thrives on that, we can be so cruel and so underhanded with each other. And so it was really great to be able to select an agency that made a conscious decision not to operate that way, and I told them when they closed, I said, listen, I couldn't pick a better way to experience this industry, because they just don't play those games, and they have a reputation for not playing those games. And I'm like, that's the sort of thing I want to be a part of.
Absolutely. I wonder too where that mentality came into play, because you speak to, we are these vessels, these truth tellers, these storytellers. But for some reason, in doing that, the ego gets so wrapped up that we forget the base level of how we should be with each other. And that's interesting. I really enjoyed my experience living in Chicago and getting to know that market. And I don't know if I was just naive or aloof, but I felt like I didn't have a lot of competitive audition waiting room experiences.
No, that's great.
And then when I got to New York, it was like night and day. And that made me so sad, because being a Black actor, there's not a lot of roles. And so when I get called in for something, whatever it is, that they're considering a Black actress for that part. So we're all there in the room together. And instead of this, for me, I don't know if it's just me, but instead of us all like kikiing and, laughing and getting to know one another, it's like silence, it's not what I expected or wanted. And I hope that begins to change, especially after this whole year of us all trying to find ourselves and having lost our identity in a way. I hope that it gets better. But it sounds like you were saying it's not just the actors, but it's, on different levels within this industry.
Oh, well, I mean, like we've seen, look, all this stuff that's come out in the past few years with the Me Too movement is a perfect example of people using positions of privilege and power against people who don't have privilege and power, right? And that is that's only one example of it's one, I would argue, one of the more egregious examples of that behavior. But it comes down to, I think, look, as much as I'm an optimist and I love humans and believe in humanity, we're broken. All of us are broken. And there's always going to be a desire for us to get the edge, to get ed. I once heard about it as like, I just definitely want to make sure I'm not the first person that gets thrown out of the lifeboat. You know what I mean? So like, I don't even need to be the top dog. I just need to not be that guy. You know what I mean? And so there, which is, I think, part of why we'll all pile up on the weakest one, right? Because we're like, hey, we might not be great, but everyone remember, Joe over here. So I think that some of that is just human nature. I think also, I don't know a lot about the other side of the industry, about what it's like to be a casting director, or what it's even like to be a director. I'm a terrible director. I really am. Because I can only think about scripts in terms of an actor. So I think about it from like whatever that character's perspective is. I can't look at it as like a thing. I can't do that. Well, my older brother's a director and he's brilliant at it, but I just never got that gene. And so I don't know any of that stuff. I know enough about, just from being around, like, local one stagehands and, our wardrobe department and makeup department and stuff. So I know enough about what they do to understand the skills that are involved and, a little bit of what their daily life is like, but I still don't know what it's like to be them. But I know that for artists, I think one of the things that we can do is put the creation, put the art sort of in this place of almost deity, that like, that's the most important thing. You know what I mean? Like, and this is the holy thing, when actually I think the giving of that thing is the holy thing. You know what I mean? I think that there's a thing that happens, and I think we've all experienced it in Lion King and other places. There's this moment of connection with every person who's there. There's an experience. There's something happen, and this is why I think live theater is important, because you can't experience this on camera. Is that there's an exchange of energy, feeling, self that is remarkable and beautiful. And like and you get that from great painting, you get that from great sculpture, you get a sense that there's an artist there who was like, this is a thing that I can give to the world that will do something, that will have an effect on it. You know what I mean? You might not always know what it is, but that's a beautiful thing. And I think that artists, we can get wrapped up in doing that, and I want to be the person who does that. And look, it's a good feeling. It's a good feeling when that happens. It feels great. And you can, I think, get yourself to a place where you're chasing the high rather than doing the work. You know what I mean? And so I think that, because it is, it's a total rush. You know what I mean? Like when you go out and when the place like opens up and people are screaming and going, oh man, that's good crackers, but if that's the thing that you're chasing rather than telling the story and giving the gift, I think that's where we as artists will get lost. And I think that that's compounded by the fact that you've got a lot of money at stake here, and money makes people do crappy stuff. You know what I mean? Like, so you've got a producer who's sinking millions of dollars into a show. They want to get a return on their investment, and I can understand that. But it's also a matter of like, what is the cost here in terms of what we're doing? And sometimes it's not quantifiable in a monetary way. Sometimes we have to ask ourselves what the cost is to our souls and to, like, it's like, what does it profit a man to gain the world and lose his soul? You know what I mean? And I think that that's the thing. When we take the soul out of art, we've lost the whole purpose of it. I'm talking a lot, maybe like preaching about this now, so I'm sorry if I'm all over the place.
No, I appreciate it, because even just you talking about that, about just really the live theater medium and getting the chance to experience those accolades firsthand, is it's interesting. And then it's like, then you go over to TV and film, where maybe you don't receive those accolades in that way, but it's just it's different. And I have to ask you about this, because I haven't done any TV and film, and so I'm curious. Yes. Let's say yet. I haven't done any TV and film yet, but I know that you've done quite a bit, and you just came from shooting a guest star on FBI, which
Yeah.
congratulations. That's
Thank
amazing.
you.
So what is it like
nice.
to switch mediums and to go into that world?
Well, first, it was really great to be acting again. It's been a year. So that was awesome. And I think I also want to, like, a sidebar about FBI. They have one of the coolest groups I've ever worked with there. They are like, so they're Missy Peregrine and Zico Zaki are their two principals. And you could not find a more kind, empathetic, welcoming pair of people. Like, they were just, and it's what I found on TV sets is that, like, if you're one or two on the call sheet, that sort of filters down that energy, and that, because like the show centers around you, you're there every day, you're there most often, you're the busiest, and so that all filters down to the rest of it. And when I got there, the PAs are kind and happy, you know what I mean, like the sound guys are cheerful, everybody, and working with the two of them and a couple of the other cast members, like, they're dedicated to the work, they take it seriously and do it, and they have fun, you know, and they're present with people. And it's definitely not an environment of, okay, this is the thing that we do here, so like, you better show up and get it done. They were like, no, this is our thing, come on in,
Nice.
how do we do this together? And, oh man, it was just a thrill and a pleasure. Like, if I couldn't act for a year and then had to pick a job to come back to, it would be that. Like, what a gift to get to work with people like that. But it's interesting because we were actually talking about it, and because, you know, like, I've sung Hakuna Matata like 3,500 times, and they were like, you know, how do you do that? Like, you know, they were like, we get tired of doing the same, like 10 takes on the same scene, you know. And I was like, but there's a difference, because we have an audience, we have a new cast member every night, which is 1,700 people in the audience. So there's a different energy that comes with that fuels your performance, I think. But in terms of the technical elements of it, so I haven't done like a ton of on-camera work. I've done a bit of it, but I think what I'm learning about it and continuing to learn is that it's not, I think all acting is the same, right? Like, you're there to do something. So you got to figure out, like, what's happening, why are you there, what are you doing, what you're doing for, right? So, but it's sort of like the muscles you use there. It's like going from like powerlifting to CrossFit. You know what I mean? Like, you're working out both times, but it's a different muscle group. It's a different thing. And I find that for on-camera work, I just have to do a lot less than I usually do, because the camera's going to pick up a lot more. So especially if I'm used to filling up a 1,700 seat auditorium, which we are, instead of like playing something like that, all I have to really do is move my eyes most of the time. You know what I mean? So it's not different. It's not about like changing the way you're doing anything. It's just about recognizing and trying to get into this mode of, what would I do if I was sitting with a person here? Because I am. Right. So in a lot of ways, like, especially if we've been in theater for a long time, we have instincts based on that experience, and your instincts aren't geared for the film and TV. This is what I was talking with some of the cast about, is that, like, I just don't have those instincts, and they do. And so when they get big or small, it all reads the right way, because they know how to make choices, and they just do that very naturally. So, but what I learned is, like, just try to be present, and at the end of it, try not to think about it as much as you can. You know what I mean? Like, the work of like what I'm going to deliver it to try to bring it in, to try to be a little more specific and perhaps less, I hate the word broad because that sounds fake, but like to maybe distill what I'm doing down to a more, a finer, pure thing, would be, you do that before. So you do that and you think, okay, this is my instinct. Okay, but I'm on camera. So it's almost like, you know, we work with puppets and masks. So like when I'm in Pumbaa, I laugh, but when I was learning the puppet, I had to go, so Pumbaa's laughing, so I've got to do this, and this, and this. You know what I mean? You do that before you get to the stage, so that when you're on stage, you play. When you're on stage, you're alive and you're dealing with what's happening. And that's sort of the thing here. It's like, okay, so this is my instinct here. What would that look like on camera? Okay, let me work that in and until it feels true and feels right, and then do that, you know, for the. And then I was lucky enough too. The director was a guy named Alex Chappell. He's also an executive producer on the show, and he, oh, what a gift! Here's all directors, in my humble opinion, all directors should be cheerleaders that tell you how to do better. That's what every director should be, because otherwise you're just like, oh, sure, I'm screwing it up. Oh, it's terrible. And every time you come in, oh, that's great, that's so great, thank you so much. That's really, really great. Now let's just, but maybe we just think about this. You know what I mean? Like, so very collaborative, very much like, I'm totally on your team here. This is working. We've got it in the can. Let's get more options. You know what I mean? Like, and that's the way to work. So, but your director will help you with that, especially if you've got a good director, you know? So like for the audition for that, I think it's really just about saying like, how do I find the purest, simplest way of doing this thing? Whereas if I was on stage and I'm the one in control of the medium, because the camera's in control of the medium on film, but if I'm the one in control of the medium, I can make that whatever I want. You can't do that on film and TV. That medium is set for you. You know what I mean? And so it's just it's a technical element that I think you just have to figure out how to work into your toolbox. It's a very long answer.
Oh no, it was a perfect answer.
Okay.
We've been doing because Austin is my reader every time I do these. And so we've been doing.
You bet you love that, right, buddy? Yeah, that's fun stuff.
We've had quite a journey.
Oh yeah.
Like the worst thing in the world.
That's never a marriage destroyer, ever.
Yeah. But now we're doing pretty good, actually, I think.
Yeah, we've been doing a lot better with it because I think at first it was just about me being nervous and not being my kindest version of myself because I'm nervous.
Oh, that's weird. I'm always my kindest when I'm nervous. It's so weird. What's wrong with you?
And then it was about like, that was mainly it. Once we got over that, then we were able to meet each other and give each other what we need. But the greatest thing that I have experienced in doing a bunch of auditions now is I'm getting better at memorizing everything. It feels way more natural. It's like, oh, okay, this is all right. How many scenes? Oh, okay. And then, 10 minutes later, I'm like, okay, Austin, let's just do this one. And then I'll go back and learn the next one. And, it makes, I don't know, it just makes for a better experience for both of us if we keep it short.
Yeah. Yes.
But what I'm discovering is that the more I connect with the character or the more it feels more natural to me, the less nervous I am, the more connected I feel. And it kind of goes against to what you were saying earlier, where you were like, it's felt like you had more of like a Meryl Streep type of approach to it, like become someone else in it. And, and then that's the art. But I'm finding when I get into these TV and film auditions for me, because I'm starting out and it's new, the closer I feel connected to the character, the more natural it feels for me to say these lines and like, oh yeah, I would totally do that in real life. It feels easier to open the door in this realm in that way. I feel like if I got something really off the wall, like maybe something sci-fi, then I could really take it there because it would feel so otherworldly. But when like I've gotten called in for like a detective that, she made a wrong move or whatever, now she drinks too much. I didn't connect with it at all. And the whole time, all I was just like, I don't understand her. I don't understand her. I don't understand her. And that's all, it was a block for me.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think that like, in terms of like becoming another character and stuff, I think that you're always going to bring whatever you would be in those circumstances, right? So I think there's still an element of us in all of our characters. There are actors who disappear into roles, and I think that's extraordinary. I don't really do that, you know what I mean? But also when we're talking about film and TV, especially if we're talking about something like a cop show, right? Like FBI or something like that. Like these are all people living in modern day America like us. You know what I mean? So this is not the thing. Like I'm not doing an Oscar Wilde play here. You know what I mean? Like I'm not, my agent once said to me, it ain't Chekhov. So, I think that there's an element of that. And there's a time and a place to experiment with like big characters. And there are times when you'll get that audition. You're like, I'm going to do a second take. And I'm just going to really go off the rails. Oh, nice. And it might work. And it might be really embarrassing, So that's kind of the fun thing about film and TV is that you can do that. But no, I think that particularly when you talk about like modern stuff set in our day and age, right? Like if you're doing something like Marvelous Mrs. Maisel or period pieces, Bridgerton, any of those stuff, like that's going to be a different process. That's going to be you're going to have to do a lot of research. You're going to have to figure out like, okay, what were people wearing? How did they stand? How did they sit? Like that's all part of the information. Like if I'm auditioning for FBI in 2021, I've got most of that information. You know what I mean? So that's yeah. I think I think we're talking about the same thing. It's just it really depends on what the work is that you're doing. You know what I mean? That will inform that.
Yeah, definitely. So with all the auditions that you've done, because I know you still audition while you're on stage, while you are on contract with The Lion King. What's the craziest audition story you've ever had, experience you've had?
So this is the one I'll tell two. I'll tell one I screwed up and one I booked. Okay, and the one I screwed up, it was like I was going in for like it was the same casting director both times. It was like a 1-line audition, and I think it was for like person of interest, and it was like no, don't shoot me. I did this for some reason. I don't even remember what it was. It was like that. No problem. Like literally 3 sentences. Boom. Been in for this casting director. He's cast me before. At this point, it's like I know this guy. Whatever. Like, get in. Hey, how you doing? Awesome, cool. Yeah, let's do this thing. All right, and action. First sentence. Sorry. 7 times. It took me 7 tries to get out 3 sentences. And by the end of it, he was like, it's 1 line. I don't know what the problem is. And I was like, I don't know what the problem is. It was awful. And I went out and I called my agent. I was like, I'm so sorry. I was ready for it. This was like, and she was like, it's like your first really crappy one in like 5 years. It's okay. You know what I mean? She was like, learn from it. You'll be fine. You know what I mean? Booked that. Then they wrote the part out of the show. So it was like, I was like, I don't even know. It was like a big roller coaster. But the second one, the one that I actually booked and got to perform, was Madam Secretary. I had a little 1-scene part of Madam Secretary. I got a call from my agent at noon, and they were like, hey, can you get to so-and-so's casting office in 4 hours, and can you do an Israeli accent?
Oh my
gosh.
I
was like, because I mean, I know I look super Israeli. And I was like, no. You know what I mean? Like, that's not, Israeli accent. It's not like when you just have in your back pocket. You know what I mean? Like, so I was like, no, I do like Western Europe. I do the boring white people of Western Europe. That's what I do. Like, so, but I was like, I mean, I'll look it up. I got a couple hours here. So it's like, I'll look it up, but tell them it's like going to be, don't expect like a finished product here, And she was like, all right, sure. Yeah, fine. They want to see you. And I was like, okay. So like went home, changed my shirt, rolled on down to the casting office, and like went in, and I was like, they were like, hey, how you doing with the accent? And I was like, okay, guys, I watched some Gal Gadot and like Benjamin Netanyahu videos. Okay. It's like, this is how far we've gotten in the work. So, because you gave me like 3 hours. So I was like, so I'll give it a shot. And I did this like
Adrian and I hope that you have enjoyed listening to the show thus far. If you'd like to hear the full interview and get access to the curtain call, head on over to 32barcut.com, where you can find a link to our Patreon page. There you will have exclusive access to the entire video collection and private RSS podcast feed, as well as other subscriber-only content. All right, that's all I got. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.